Hey, what's up, viewer? Welcome back to this Nebula's live development creation series. This is day 16, hour 3, and I'm excited that I actually managed to get 3 hours in a day. Definitely missed a bunch of days in the last week or two, even getting up to that number, so I'm happy to see that I've got it to this point. Alright, so in the last video I was messing around with the code to make an active nebula non-hoverable and selectable whenever the player is zoomed in. However, I've been running into an issue where when I actually zoom in this regard, the code is not working. And if we take a look, the component is still deactivated. So the component did properly deactivate, but for some reason, like the code was correct, but it's not working correctly. So it seems like this lifecycle hook does not actually get deactivated even though the component is, or something. And the other thing is that if I select it here, it turns green, which also shouldn't happen. Due to this fact, the idea of using essentially this line I wrote at the end of the last video is basically not going to work. And let me double check that there isn't anything that I can right here. Don't think so. So I'm just going to yank this out. Same thing on the other side. It's not making the difference anyway. So instead, I'm in fact going to have to I kind of don't want to guard it in here. If I guard it in here, it has to like check what tier it's on and stuff like that. The easiest thing would be to just remove the component and re-add the component, but that I know that's like an ECS no-no because you are reforming the archetype the object is a part of. But I'm going to, for now, I think that's just what I'm going to do. So in these places here, more or less, it's like the same code actually, it's just and what does not have one or something, or player data, current nebula selection, current nebula selection. I think I have to say destroy. Change color on hover. Qualify it with a type name instead. Let me see if there is a different override for destroy. Now it's not even showing up anymore. So I can add a component, no problem, but this thing is a game object also. So I shouldn't have to say game object dot game object, surely. But maybe I'm supposed to say destroy and I can in fact destroy a component. And the component we are looking for is change killer on hover component. Although it was getting a little upset at me trying to do it like this. And I'm supposing T was just the time, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the optional amount of time to delay before destroying the object. We'll say none for now. So here we're destroying the component, and then here we would be adding the component back on. So let's give this a split second to compile and then take a look at whether or not it's working at this point. Alright, so if we click on this and zoom in. Alright, so we no longer have hover when we zoom in. And if I double check the nebula, it no longer has the component. I can still click on it, but that makes sense. If I zoom out, it adds the component. And now it's back to working. And that's basically how it's supposed to work. And like I said, that might be an ECS no-no, but it's like 2 lines of code if I do it like that. So for now, I'm just going to let it go. So then the other thing is selecting it whenever and I just feel like Unity 3D raycast layer. I think I have to I think there's a parameter for it. So really it's just that simple. Okay, but for that I would have to create a layer for there is an ignore recast layer out by default. So in that instance, I wonder if I could just, once again, once I enter the nebula, simply like, oh, this is, no, yeah, this is, okay. So, player data, current nebula selection, dot layer. Yeah, and I can just say equals, and I have to remember that 2 is the, is there like a layer? Okay. Not gonna worry about that. I'm pretty sure it's just 2. Let me just double check, but so I can just set it to the second, to layer number 2, and then it will very simply ignore raycasts, and it will be unselectable whenever it is in the side of the nebula view. And then whenever we exit the nebula view, it will switch its layer back so that it can be clicked again. So let me see here. First nebula is on the default layer. If I click this and zoom in, it should shift to the ignore raycast layer. So now there is no longer a random, or there's no longer hover, and there's no longer raycast. And if I zoom out, it goes back to being selectable and hoverable. Alright, so now we're just looking at a few other things. Oh, it looks like my, oh, that's a blue. Alright, so the main thing is that the camera just needs to like be a little different because it's, oh, that's the rotation. Whoops, my bad. Alright, so it's a little strange how that looks, but more or less like the camera, I might even need to change the camera to look straight down, but the next thing that needs to happen is I need to be able to pan the camera within this tier and then like make sure that it doesn't leave the nebula. And I need to be able to do some zooming. Alright, so we already have a pan camera script. Let me open this back up. And the issue I'm running into is that like the Galactic tier is or the different tiers can't use the same panning value because it's tuned for a specific range. So once it zooms out really far, it makes no difference basically. So I've got to basically multiply this and this by a variable that changes depending on which current tier is selected. So I gotta come up with something for that. And we're probably gonna need the player data as where I'm going to store these values. Oh, is that something I was going to look up? I can't remember now. I was going to double check, probably going to put up a forum post and double check if this works like I think it does or if it works in a different way, because if it works in a different way it's not as efficient. My hope is that it is in fact internally grabbing a singleton of player data, since archetypally it can tell that there's only one, so it just like yanks the archetype, or like it yanks the type from the archetype data basically. But I'm not sure if that's actually how that works. It might simply be iterating through every game object and looking for the type, which is still pretty quick because it's the second object in the hierarchy. And if I moved the main camera below, it would actually be the first one. So I need to check if either of those things make a difference basically, but for now, we grab the player data like this. There is a value that has to change. And okay, so there essentially needs to be 4 different values. Or there needs to be a value for every tier, so 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, like maybe 3 to 5. Right now we're only working on the first 2 anyway. So if we're assuming there's like 4 or 5 tiers, there basically needs to be an array of those values. But more specifically, there just needs to be like those 5 values. And then those 5 values need to go into an array. And then there's just a global value then. So like, let's see here. Nebula spawning. Okay, so we've got something like public. And what is this? I might as well make it float. Let's see. Galaxy. Yeah, I'll just call it speed and we can change it. But if I call it speed, that makes me worry that somebody will say it's not technically the speed. So, whatever. So just to sate my anxiety, I'm going to call it Galaxy Pan Adjuster. And that might be even less clear, but oh well. So now I have star Pan Adjuster. So that's at the galaxy, at the nebula, and then at the star level, which is pretty much on a planet, right? Because you're in the galaxy, it can pan. Then you're in the nebula, it can pan. Then you've like zoomed into a star system and you're panning around in a star system. And then the idea would be that maybe from there you could pan around your planet, but more likely if you've selected the planet and you're next to the planet, the most you would want to do is orbit it. So I guess we can go like this for now. However, these need to be in a public float array, actually. On pan adjusters. And I'm debating on using an enum for readability. So I have what I'm wanting to do something like this. Public enum Galaxy Tier. And I don't remember how to declare them actually. So it was like Galaxy, Nebula, Star, something like this. Did I say equals or? Is it an array? I haven't done an enum in a bit, so I've kind of forgotten here. So C# enum. Oh, no, that's exactly what it did, isn't it? Enum season names, yeah. Oh, I don't have to use strings. I don't have to. I actually don't need these, probably. And then you just do a public galaxy tier, current galaxy tier. And if I do it like this, I can just expose the enum from the player data type anyway. I don't have to generate an entire enum file. I can take a look at my player data, scroll to the bottom, and I see that I have a current galaxy tier which starts the galaxy. That's correct. And I can actually inspect that as it goes, but I forgot to add a header here. I'll just call it miscellaneous for now since I don't actually have a good idea for what to call that. All right, so now we're looking at going into our pan camera, and we have to go in here and say, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Basically, we can just say player data dot pan adjusters at player data dot current Galaxy tier. And because it's an enum, it's supposed to be synonymous with an integer value. Something I have to do an explicit typecast. And I guess that's what I have to do, is just do kind of typecast, which is part of why the idea was instead to have a different approach. Because off the top of my head, I understand that that's not, I don't want to, that actually is like one of the few things that's happening every single frame, kind of like that. So I feel like I shouldn't be casting it every single time, because that's gonna, every single frame is going to do that again. So I just wind up needing a public float current camera pan speed, or current camera pan adjuster. Then over here, we will just say player data current camera pan adjuster. And we now have to handle which of those values get set. So if we're looking at okay, so for instance, we can change it in here. We can default it in here, or we can initialize it in here. So player data dot current camera pan adjuster equals player data dot pan adjusters at player data, and once again we can say int player data dot current Galaxy tier. And from this, it will default to, it'll actually default to who knows what, so we can actually just say this is 0. And we're just going to default it, and we can even be cheeky and say int. And can I just say Galaxy tier? I cannot, because it's not part of the global. It's not actually letting me access that enum globally. Alright, so I'm going to have to just come down here and make this enum somewhere. That way it will actually be properly global, since it's not exposing itself properly. So if we come back in here, where was my pan camera script? It was in here, wasn't it? Okay, so I'm actually going to make a camera folder, and then inside of here I can drag like these. I'll just drag these camera components in this, and then Such a skills builder. Did I ever use this or something? Oh. It was for the editor thing. Yeah, it's kind of in a weird spot. Alright, so then inside of this camera folder we will generate a, just call it a class, and we'll have to change it to an enum. And then player data needs to, I guess I just grab it out of here, basically. And if this worked correctly, I should be able to now, inside of the pan camera script, actually reference the enum type. So let's see. The idea was I wouldn't have to cast it all. And I could just say Galaxy Tier. So now we have Galaxy Tier Global, and we can just say Galaxy. And it's still making me cast it as an integer. Still though, caching it's better than doing it down here. So, okay, so this will just default it to being the galaxy speed. From here, we have to actually jump back into all this stuff. So in the event the LERP completes, enter selected nebula. So now we're looking at player data dot current galaxy tier equals galaxy tier dot nebula. Okay. And then we have to set player data dot current camera pan adjuster equal to player data dot pan adjusters at int player data dot current galaxy tier. And since it's an enum, it will in fact switch to whichever enum value is done. Event is actually irrelevant because we only want to give it one particular value here, in fact. And we so instead we can just go like this, and it doesn't have to mess around with the variable, just it's always going to be going to the nebula from here. So now we will have a custom panning speed that we can set for the nebula as opposed to the galaxy and as opposed to the star system. So we do the same thing for exiting the nebula to the galaxy view. We basically just have to reproduce this, but this says galaxy. And then we need to, oh, and then I guess a little bit of cleanup would be the fact that we don't actually need this hard-coded pan damper anymore. Oh, it's lurking. That's kind of weird. Alright, I guess I'll just give this a shot and see how it looks, because the pan damper thing, I'm not sure where I was going with that, because pan damper is 10, so like... I'm not sure... if that's... I'm not sure if this is really how I want to do this, so... Let me just see how this looks. Oh, I guess I might as well just tweak the values. Alright, so first things first, pan camera is giving me some kind of error. Oh. Okay, so I very simply forgot to give this 3 values. So now the array won't break like that. And we're just going to have to play around with these values to see how they feel. First thing I'm going to do is mess around with the pan damper and double check if that can affect the galactic scale or not, because I'm not sure if it's actually doing anything. So if I go like this, the camera is not actually moving. If I set the pan damper to 0.1, does it do anything, or? It's not moving the camera at all, actually. So let me see here. Pan camera. Oh, you know what? I didn't. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's not going to move at all because the default value is 0 in the array. So set the default value to 1 for testing sake. So now I select the camera and start doing the panning. It's still not moving the camera position at all. Even if I jack this up. Okay, so it looks like my... Okay, so the idea I just had is that the galactic tier is in fact not panning. I do have some camera zooming. So the only thing that's missing is that pan view needs to get copied to Nebula view and galaxy view. And now pan view will need to... I have to write this a little different. So let's see here. Where was the other... There was another script where I was using a for loop. And an array, which is this zoom camera here. Same principle. And I actually could, this is basically synonymous with Galaxy Tier. And we're basically going to do something like this. And we have to do the same thing, which is assign, so let's see, for Galaxy Tier dot, and there isn't the length of that. I'm a little surprised. Let me see here. C# length of an enum type. Enum get names, it says. Okay. So let's try that again. It's a little janky. Enum, and it's not letting me use the static thing either. Get names of, oops, get names, type of Galaxy Tier, which is quite involved to do it like this, but more or less the camera can in fact pan around anytime the player is on any of these three tiers in particular. So in this event, we're basically saying something like this again, but it's input actions, find action map, and actually, just to double check what I put in here, it's just called Galaxy Nebula Star. Okay, so I'm going to swap this around one more time, and I'm just going to put it's kind of under player input. This is very player input specific, and we are going to hide these in the inspector. And I'm going to yank this one. And then in here, we can come back here and say, action map names equals find object of type, player data, action map names. And it's basically synonymous. Oh, but I need to leave the, oh. So things go like this. So now we have the action map names, and we have passing them through the zoom camera parameters. And we more or less are doing the same thing over here. And I think player data is going to be used. Okay, so so much for this. instead we are going to be using player data dot action map names. So now all three of these need to have the pan view, but now they will all properly bear the pan view option. Which means when I start this up, I should in fact be able to pan the camera around in the galaxy view. And it might just be very small, but let's see how it looks. And I still do not see the difference. Oh, but let me see if data has changed to default value. I think I set it to 1, didn't I? Maybe the damper is too janky. Let me just change it to like 0.1 or something. Okay, so now I'm just not getting any camera pan at all, seems like. I should still see the numbers change somewhat. So, I'm not sure why this is giving me trouble. Perhaps... Alright, well the only thing I can do is check the debugger and make sure that the action is being assigned correctly. Main camera shouldn't be set to a hard-coded position. So if I push this button, it does not in fact set to pan the camera. And it does not in fact act as if this is ever getting set to true. So I have to run through this and so you have the step-by-step, see what's up. Alright, so let's see. Player data, action maps, lengths 4. Okay. Oh, did I just forget to... Okay. So kind of silly. This has to go inside of the loop. That way it actually assigns each new instance of pan camera to the actual callback value. And then this is all post, so that should be why it's not working. It wasn't actually being connected correctly. So now when I jump in here, I'm looking at an initial pan value of 1 and a pan damper of 10. So when I pan, it's saying there's an issue. Alright, so somehow I'm screwing this up. So Galaxy View, Pan View, that's the same. Nebula View, Pan View, Star System View, Pan View. Star Cluster does not have a Pan View. Oh, but I'm not running Star Cluster. All it's doing is saying, it's only finding these three. Galaxy View, Nebula View, Star System View. And they all have Pan View. It's counting as an axis. Middle button is an axis. No different than something like this. Alright, I'm going to have to debug it again. And let's take a look here. 4 actions. Wait a minute. Okay, so that's one thing that's going to screw it up, is that I thought I changed that. I did. Action map names. Wait a minute, this isn't already in here somewhere, is it? No. Action map names already has 3 values. It only has 3. Let me yank this out of here. It should only have 3 in there. So for some reason, zoom camera, or for some reason, this had an extra value, which is going to screw up the array. So I'm going to go to, maybe it was because I didn't hide an inspector and it didn't serialize properly. Let me take a look here though. And that is so weird. It has it in the inspector version. I did, like I saved, right? That is very strange, yeah. Okay, so now that it looks like this, it should work because it was trying to pull pan view off of star cluster view, but star cluster view does not have a pan view. So it was saying this doesn't exist, and it was correct, it doesn't. So now if I go take a look down here, we're looking at, okay. So now if I grab the camera, move in here, now we're getting micro panning like we're supposed to be. Okay. And obviously it's way too light on the value. So if I change this to 0.1, does it go faster or slower? So 94 to 92. to 70. So a higher damper value actually makes it go faster. But does it actually make it go faster than 1 though? So like 91 to 70. Yeah, it's like 68, 89, 70, 90, 70. And if it goes to like 1,000, it's like fifty to 70. Yeah, it's just okay. So I probably need to rework this pretty hard because I might be screwing up the lerp. I don't need it to lerp every time. I just need it to transform. That's all it's doing. So like it literally just has to turn into the new camera position. And I'm going to keep this just in case, but and I don't have to use the pan damper at all. And instead we leave the speed values specifically for each tier. Alright. Getting close to done for this hour. Let's open this up and give it a one more shot here. Once again, it's micro panning, but if I change the current camera pan adjuster to like 1,000 and I pan, now we have a slightly jittery, it kind of feels a little jittery, but we have a functional panning, more or less. And actually the zoom value is working as well, so the pan and the zoom are close to working. Maybe do some micro adjustments, but they're just about ready to go. So, all right, that was about it then for this video. It was just getting the pan to work. It needs some adjustment, but it is there with some minor adjustment to that in the zoom system. The player will have a little bit more control over positioning their own view, and then the next step will be like just micro adjusting the camera for once it's in the Nebula view. So, and then we'll also have to make sure that we do not pan the camera while the camera is flying through the air. So we'll have to, there's probably a few more kinks we have to work out, but we're moving in the right direction. So thank you for watching this video all the way to the end if you have, and I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.